Hello, my friends. Let's start by reviewing the situation on the front lines. We'll begin with a summary of last week. Over the past week, we've seen several shifts along the front line. Reports indicate that the Russians have managed to take control of approximately 103 square kilometers. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian Armed Forces haven't regained control of any territory yet, meaning the advances are currently on the Russian side. As we've seen before, the Russians are making slow progress, suffering heavy losses, but continuing to capture Ukrainian settlements. Now let's move on to the situation in the Kursk region. Here, as before, the Russians are shelling border settlements, but no new activity along the front line has been recorded, so the situation remains largely unchanged. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians have also reduced their activity for now, and even the shelling has decreased. However, offensive actions are still being recorded near the village of Tykhe, though the front line has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Kupiansk direction, after successful advances through the fields near Senkivka and Petropavlivka, the Russians are attempting to assault Ukrainian Armed Forces positions near Senkivka while bombarding Petropavlivka heavily in preparation for upcoming assaults. Further south, the Russians have halted their attacks for now, focusing on shelling instead, so there have been no changes to the front line over the past day. In the Svatove area, the Russians continue advancing toward Borova. Unfortunately, they are experiencing periodic successes in this direction as well. However, today fighting is still ongoing near Lozova, as well as they attempt to break through to the village of Vishneve. So far, they have been unable to consolidate their positions, leaving the front line unchanged. Further south, the Russians have claimed full control of the village of Makiivka, where battles have been fought for months. However, the Ukrainian side hasn't yet confirmed this information, so we are waiting for official updates. Meanwhile, fighting continues near Kharkivka, but the front line remains unchanged for now. In the Kreminna direction, the Russians continue their assaults on Nevske, Terne, and Toretsk. Despite earlier Russian claims of capturing Nevske and achieving success around Toretsk, there have been no confirmed changes along the front line, and their alleged gains remain unverified. In the Siversk direction, the Russians continue their attacks around Bilogorivka, Verkhnyo-Kamiensk, and Vyimka. Though their activity remains slow, over the past day they carried out a single assault on each village without any success. The Ukrainian Armed Forces have held their defense, leaving the situation unchanged. The situation near Chasiv Yar, however, is more concerning. The Russians have managed to capture Klishchiivka and Andriivka, leveling the front line. They are now gathering additional reserves to push the flanks around Chasiv Yar and advance further toward Kostyantynivka. Ongoing assaults on the outskirts of Chasiv Yar are still being recorded. There are also attempts to break through near the canal around Kalinivka, and reports of clashes near Diliivka have surfaced. Despite these efforts, there have been no changes along the front line in the past day. In the Toretsk direction, the Russians continue advancing deeper into the city, with battles now reaching the city center. They are also pushing closer to Shcherbinivka, and fighting is ongoing near Nelipivka. However, there have been no confirmed changes along the front line over the past day. In the Pokrovsk direction, fighting is taking place near Myrolubivka, Mykolaiivka, then Selidove, Tsukurine, and Hirnik. Unfortunately, there is no good news from this area. According to the latest reports, the Russians have entrenched themselves on the outskirts of Tsukurine. Their advance is slow but steady. No confirmed changes have been reported in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, false reports are circulating online claiming that the Ukrainian forces are cutting off Russian troops near Pokrovsk. Unfortunately, such maneuvers would require more equipment and soldiers than Ukraine currently has in this area. No counteroffensive operations are being conducted here, although it's certainly something to hope for. In the Kurakhove direction, battles continue near Makiivka and assaults are being launched on Katerynivka. Despite the heavy activity, the Russians haven't achieved any new successes and the front line remains unchanged. In the Vuhledar direction, the situation is dire. Soldiers on the ground report that the commander has been replaced, leaving uncertainty about how the situation will evolve under new leadership. For now, the fighting continues and the Ukrainian Armed Forces are still holding their positions, though the entire area is under constant fire. Despite the intense pressure, there have been no changes to the front line. Additionally, the Russians continue attacking near Vodene, attempting to advance closer to Bogoyavlenka. But once again, the front line remains unchanged over the past day. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are attempting to advance near Robotine and are testing the defenses of the Ukrainian forces around the village of Kamiansk. Reports from the Ukrainian Armed Forces suggest that the Russians may be preparing for a major offensive toward Zaporizhzhia. This is reflected in the increased shelling both in the frontline areas and directly targeting Zaporizhzhia itself. However, no large-scale assaults have been recorded yet, and the frontline remains unchanged for the past day. In the Kherson direction, the Russians continue to shell the right bank of the Dnipro River. There are also repeated attempts to advance on the islands near Hola Prystan, but the Ukrainian forces have successfully repelled these efforts and the Russians have made no gains. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.